can't hear it.
Lindsay, you're muted.
You're muted. Yeah. Hi everybody, sorry. This is the Talking Animals Kids and Teens panel. First one on Saturday morning with Wendy H Jones and Lin Anderson. And it's been chaired by Caz Maston of the UK Kind Book Club. So check that one out. So I'll leave the ladies to
Hi Wendy and Lin.
Hi.
Good morning. Good morning.
Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about your books?
Okay, Wendy, you go first. You're more seasoned child author than me.
Well, I actually write adult crime books like Lynn, but both of us have branched out into children's mysteries. Now, I have to say, this little chap that sat here, Bertie the Buffalo, the only mystery about him was where he was in real life. In all fairness, the little man went missing in real life in Fife. And it was the BBC that called him Bert because they were out looking for him. And he was missing for 14 days before he actually took himself home. And nobody knew where he was in those 14 days. So I was asked by the farm from where he went missing if I would write a children's picture book based around it. And I said, well, yes, as long as I get a publishing contract, thinking, well, that'll be the end of that one. No, I got a publishing contract. And Bertie the Buffalo was born. Now, the BBC called him Bert, so I was stuck with the name. But it's a rhyming picture book for 3 to 7-year-olds. We say up to 7 because they can read it themselves. And that was where Bertie the Buffalo came from. So he's running around the countryside on his own, having an adventure. And it's actually about feeling loved and feeling welcomed. Because the thing is, he runs away because he doesn't think anyone notices him because he's so small. Poor little Bertie. But so he's Scotland's very own little escape artist, and he really is. My Ferguson Flora books, which are these ones, and obviously I haven't got any merchandise for these little chaps, apart from a dagger, because this is called The Dagger's Curse. These are mysteries set in Scotland. The first one's set in Dundee. The second one's set in Stirling. And they're archaeological mysteries as well as contemporary mysteries. So they've got a bit of history in them, and they've got a bit of contemporary archaeology in them. And it's a couple of teenagers called Fergus and Flora who run around doing all the things that we want to do when we were kids, but we were never allowed to. Because it's a bit of a mixture of Famous Five meets Scooby-Doo, and it's got a bit of the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew in it as well. So it's just a fun mystery. It's got a lot of codes in it, which the readers can try and solve before Fergus and Flora actually do. And I had a little bit of help with that. I've got a friend who's a forensic code analyst, and she took a look over them to see if they made any sense. And she said, oh, they're quite good. She says, I cracked them quickly. But and then again, that's my job. She works for the FBI, so, you know. So that's what my books are about. And I'm excited to hear what Lynn's book's about, because this is a brand new adventure. And I'm very excited.
Yeah, this is obviously my first foray into writing for children. I was it sounds like you were too, an enormous fan of the Famous Five, where young people get to solve the problems that adults fail to manage, which is very empowering. Anyway, how it came about was Blaze, who's the star and is a real dog, on Sky, a border collie. If you haven't met him, if you look up Twitter at Blaze Page, you'll meet him through that. But I was over in Sky visiting his owner. I hadn't got an idea for the next Rona book at that point, and I was over, it was a February, and I was over visiting, very cold, snowy on Skye. And Blaze took me a walk up the back through where he lives, Ace Target Sports. While the men were throwing axes, I'd had my shot at that axe throwing, and I went a walk with Blaze, and he led me to a clearing, and there was nothing bad about the clearing, except in that moment, I thought, this is the opening to a Rona book, except I will make something bad in that clearing. So Blaze was my inspiration for Time for the Dead. And I had such fun doing the research. I decided he was going to be in the book because Rona is over there and she is not working because of what has happened to her in a previous book. So she's basically trying to recover. And the dog becomes her forensic assistant in this mysterious, what she thinks is a crime scene. And once I started to really research the whole business of the powers of dogs as forensic assistants, because they were our first ones, they were the ones who could scent and follow and find out things that we were incapable of doing. And I just thought this could be so much fun if I could just give Blaze another outing. And I was a great fan of Katie Morag books, which eventually reached the telly. They should have reached the telly years before. They were just quite magical. And my granddaughter loved them, and the whole island life and the characters. And of course, they reminded me of Skye. So that gave me a setting. And I thought I would use Blaze, having helped the police in previous searches, now decides to become a dog detective with these fabulous scenting skills. So that was the idea. And it was interesting when you were talking about Bertie there, because my original idea was a picture book. And I spoke to Steve's owner, Blaze's owner, and he and I discussed that, and we looked at Katie Morag books, and we thought about that for quite a long time. And then I realized there was a better opportunity if I just took it a bit older to engage with the island and the dog stories with a full sort of mystery. So I moved to that, and we came up with the first idea of Blaze Dog Detective. And I haven't got a book here yet because they're just getting printed. The Magic Flag Mystery. And obviously I worked with Donald Mackay, which is Blaze's owner's writing name, because the characters were so with him all the time. And of course, with the island life, he knew all about it and all the different characters in Portree, which were very colourful and interesting, much like the Katie Morag ones. And that's how we began. So Blaze Dog Detective is out now, and it is the pilot for a series, because as soon as you know that feeling, as soon as you get one idea and you've got the world and you create the world and the gang. And one last thing to say, I have a granddaughter, Kathleen, and she had been asking me for a long time to write a children's book. So I have done that now, and the little girl in it, Rosa, is modelled on my 10-year-old little granddaughter. She gave me the idea, and that character came out of that. So that's the story.
Fab, I think we're reading about both of you, so should we start with
Yep.
I couldn't actually hear you there, Caz, because you were in echo.
Sorry, can we start with your reading?
My reading?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like me to start? I'll do both. I'll do Bertie the Buffalo and Ferguson Flora, but it won't take long. I'm not going to do loads. Apologies for disappearing. Just to prove that authors are exactly the same as everybody else, my postie had brought a parcel and he would not stop ringing the doorbell. I was hoping he would just leave it on the doorstep or disappear, but to no avail. So apologies for disappearing. Right. And just to say, if you've got any questions for either Lynn or I, or even Caz, because Caz is amazing, she runs the UK Crime Book Club, ask us questions. We're here to be asked. You can interrogate us. This is Bertie the Buffalo. I'm not entirely sure if you can see it, but I'll read you a couple of pages from it. Bertie the Buffalo was really, really wee. He galloped round his paddock, giddy with glee. Bertie was the smallest of the animals on the farm. He couldn't even reach to the farmer's arm. There were great big older buffalo with great big horns and tiny little buffalo who had just been born. Mr. and Mrs. Emu, who laid ginormous eggs, and tiny little emus with long necks and legs. I'll give you one more and that's it. We'll go on to Ferguson Flora, because just to prove there are more pages. Bertie played at racing. He was the fastest baby there, apart from any emu who could outrun a bear. Jumping was his favourite over dry, stained dikes, with Grandma Buffalo shouting, "Come back, you little tyke!" He's a very naughty buffalo, is Bertie. And he gets a lot naughtier when he runs away. Silly Bertie. Then we've got the Dagger's Curse. Now, this is Ferguson Flora, our teenagers. And just to let you know that an ancient Egyptian dagger has been stolen from the museum in Dundee, the McManus Galleries. And it's laid a curse on Dundee. Of course, the only people who can break this curse and save Dundee are a couple of teenagers called Ferguson Flora, who are 13 years old. So they're in the museum seeing the dagger at the moment with their school. Last day of school, and they've been dragged to a museum. Flora MacDonald pressed her face and hands against the glass of the shiny new display case. With her fluorescent orange T-shirt, she looked like a tabby cat sliding down a window. She was sweating like a lamb in a lion's cage, leaving smears all over the clean glass. Her eyes were fixed on the contents of the case. Stace McIntyre picked at the edge of her shellac nails as she gazed at the ceiling. Boring. Only sunny day we've had this year and we're stuck in a crummy old museum. Flora swiveled round and elbowed through the crowd of school kids towards the offender. Enough with the talking, loudmouth. You might have the IQ of a slug, but some of us are listening. Yeah, shut it. Tegan Globe joined in. Some of us want to learn. Do you want me to tell you what that means? Her blonde ponytail swung in time to her words. The others shuffled around, their eyes brimming with expectation. A bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds with teen concerns. They were anticipating a fight. Someone whispered, might liven things up. Flora tightened her fists in readiness in case it kicked off. Although not one to start a fight herself, she didn't mind taking precautions. The vaulted ceilings of the vast, almost empty hall of the museum picked up their voices and bounced the sounds off the thick stone walls in booming echoes. The sun had kept most people away despite the popularity. Mrs. Brannigan, their history teacher, whipped around and glared at them. Girls, one more word out of you and the whole class gets detention. So that's just to prove that despite the fact our heroes save the day, they're just the same as any other teenager in the world when they're at school. But this is the last day of school, and it opens up to all hosts of complications when this beautiful dagger that they're there to see, which has been on loan from the museum in Egypt, gets stolen and lays a curse on Dundee. So that's my book.
Before we go on to Lynn, Leslie Kelly, who writes the Fab Health of Strangers series, has said she loved the Bertie readings.
Oh, thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, see that there. I was just going to say I recognise myself in that final little bit about the teacher, having been a teacher for about 20 odd years. Yeah, just the end of the school term is always a tricky one, no matter what you do with kids. That sounded really good. Okay, here's the opening chapter of Blaze Dog Detective. I should say that, in the book there is a lovely map of Skye that leads off on the adventure, which obviously I can't show you here at the moment. Hi, I'm Blaze Dog Detective. I live on the Isle of Skye with my wee brother Luach, who's also a border collie, and my human dad. I'm mostly black and shaggy with brown eyes, while Luach is mostly white with one blue eye and one brown. Skye is a big island off the west coast of Scotland. The island is famous for lots of things, including mountains and great beaches. We also have 3 castles. How did I become a dog detective, you might ask? Well, the idea probably began when I helped the Skye and Lochaber police to find a missing person in the mountains, using my excellent scenting skills. Dad can tell by smell when he's put sugar in his tea. Me, I could scent that spoonful of sugar in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's how good my nose is. I'm scenting at the moment and running and panting because I'm chasing something, but it's not a robber, not this time. I'm chasing a rabbit, which I'm sorry to say is faster than me and definitely better at hiding. I now realise that this particular rabbit, a big grey one with a floppy ear, has won again. So I stop running and take a seat. From the top of the hill behind our home, I can see the road to the Fairy Glen, another of Skye's famous landmarks. It also leads to one of the castles I mentioned earlier, Dunvegan, home of the fairy flag, an ancient relic of the Clan MacLeod, as precious to them as Scotland's crown jewels are to the people of Scotland. From here, I can also watch the road that comes up from Portree, and eventually I spot what I'm looking for. Hurrah! I take off faster on the way down than on the way up. I'm almost back at our cottage, Tyna Colley, the house of the Colleys, when I hear the startling bark of my wee brother Luach. So he's spotted who's coming too. The roar of the motorbike approaching has Luach jumping and twirling in the air with excitement. I'm excited too, but I just give one of my happy barks. As the red motorbike roars through the gate, I realise it looks different and there's more than just Granny Beaton on it. Granny B's no ordinary granny, Dad says. She used to travel about Scotland in a horse-drawn caravan. Now she lives on a croft above Portree and travels about Skye in her red motorbike. She also has a crystal ball. Tonight, my pal Rory is riding pillion on the famous bike, and Granny's also attached her wee sidecar. And wait a minute, there's someone in it. It's a girl I've never seen before. Parked up now, Granny gives one of her high whistles that no one but Luach and I can hear. This makes Luach stop his leaping about, and he immediately sits down as still as a statue. Me? I also wait as instructed by that whistle, while Granny takes off her black helmet with a red flame and opens the door of the sidecar to let the girl out. She's small, maybe 10 years in human age, with long, wild, curly brown hair. She looks a little hesitant, as though she's just entered a classroom full of school bullies. I wag my tail and give her one of my best smiles, as if to say, any friend of Granny Beaton's a friend of mine. This is Rosa, Granny says, my granddaughter. She's come from Glasgow to live with me on Skye. Granny and Dad exchange looks as though he knows something about all of this already. I wanted to ask why she'd come to live on Skye and where her parents were. At this point, Rosa's eyes met mine, and the funny thing is, I could see exactly what she was thinking. This gave me quite a shock, I can tell you. Dad and I have what he calls a rapport, which I think means he gives me orders and I obey. Luach not so much, but he's still young and learning. I can often tell what Dad's thinking, but it doesn't work both ways. Not like what was happening right now. I could see Rosa in the back seat of a car. There was a terrible screech of tyres, a crashing sound, and then her world flipped over. Rosa took her sad eyes from mine, and the moment ended. I gave a little whine and went up to her and nuzzled her hand, and I seemed to hear her say, thank you, although it wasn't out loud. Welcome to Tyna Colley, Rosa, Dad said, and then he and Granny were talking about lighting the outside fire and cooking some burgers, plus sausages for the boys. That's me and Luach. Luach, recognising the word sausages, went back to his ear twirls. As Dad and Granny B set about their preparations, Rory asked Rosa if she wanted to take a look about. I like Rory. He's tall and gangly with wild hair and a serious face, except when he grins. Dad says he's a loner who likes animals more than humans. His dad's a fisherman who's at sea a lot. Rory has a canoe and I go out with him in it sometimes. Luach's not allowed to go with us until he learns to swim. My wee brother hasn't got past the paddling stage yet. Rosa gives a little nod and I realise I haven't heard her speak yet. I try to imagine her spoken voice. What will it be like? Coming, Rory says to me. Of course I am. Luke, on the other hand, has smelt the meat, brought out to cook in the fire, which is already crackling. For Luke, food always comes first. I go in front, knowing where Rory will take this little girl with the sad thoughts. He'll take her to the wooden fort on top of the hill. He'll help her climb to the top. He will show her the island that's going to be her new home, but he won't ask her why she had to come here, nor where her parents are. Me, I think I know the answer to that already.
That's a fabulous introduction.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can't wait to read the rest.
It's
Well,
really good.
Thank you. Well, I had real dogs to work with in that respect, and you know, situations and a location. I mean, I don't know about you, Wendy, but locations are so important. They become a part of the story. They become a feature. They become a character in the story.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and can I ask you a question just at that point? Obviously, I had these dogs that were real characters, and Granny Beaton is made up, and she's got a motorbike, partly because I got very interested in motorbikes when I was writing. I was writing an earlier Rona book, so she became a sort of feature of something and some people I had experienced as well. And it's where your characters come from. I was thinking about your teenagers, and were they based on anyone that you knew, or a world that you knew about that featured?
Well, I was a children's nurse anyway, so I've worked with a lot of teenagers and things, but they're half based on my nieces, in all fairness. The characteristics of the teenagers and the way they speak and the way they come out with things was based on my. By the way, my nieces are lovely. They're nothing like that. I'm sure they're perfectly well behaved in a museum. Says she. They'll be like any other teenager. But, you know, I used characteristics from them to shape the female character. The male character is based on sons and things. Fergus is a lot more gentle and not quite so feisty as Flora. But what I tried to do with Flora was, her name is Flora MacDonald. And she's the great, how many ever great, she says, granddaughter of the real Flora MacDonald. So she decided that the real Flora MacDonald was really feisty and could do what she liked. So this gives her carte blanche to do anything she wants. Because her great, however many greats, grandmother did what she liked and sailed around with Bonnie Prince Charlie in a boat. So, you know, she can do that as well. So that's where she came from. It was a kind of an amalgam of different things. Yeah.
So you both have books written for like the younger adult range, like maybe 9 to 12-year-olds. Is there a reason why you decided to pitch them for that age and not go for a sort of more teen market?
The reason for that was, to be honest, they're kind of for about 10 to kind of 12, 14-year-olds, depending on reading age. And the reason for that was I was actually asked to write this series by a publisher. And the publisher wanted, and they said, have you got an idea for a young adult series? I've got this frightful habit of saying yes to everything and then thinking, oh my goodness, what have I agreed to? So I said, oh yes, and I pitched it. And they decided that it would be for that age group. That was the age group they wanted it for. So that was why it was done like that. And also, if you do it for that age group, it gives you a bit more leeway in terms of the famous 5 type thing. Whereas if it's older teens, they tend to get up to a lot more mischief than younger teens. But people read up anyway, so it would be younger people that read it. So that would be the kind of things that they would want to get up to. Whereas the older teens, I wouldn't like to ask what they get up to. I just let my teenage nieces do what they want and just accept whatever, except that they're little angels, you know. So that was why. I was very fortunate with that because I was commissioned to do it, and I got a publishing contract for 3 books.
Yeah, I think that you were talking from, I mean, it was going to be written from, it's all told from Lisa's point of view. And the fact that the little girl and Blaise understand one another, can understand one another at a particular level, allowed me to have the human voice involved as well. I mean, I have to say, you know, my characters, particularly the dogs, almost came fully formed, although Luach, by the time I got around to writing this book, I first met Luach when he was just literally a tiny puppy. At the end of Time for the Dead, the Rona book, he's just arrived from a rescue centre, you know, and you meet him briefly at the very end of that book. And of course, by the time I got around to writing the children's book, Luach had become not an adult dog, but a sort of a dog that had much to learn yet, you know, and actually the characters themselves, I think, just lended the world that was round them seemed to need the 2 children that I've spoken about. I mean, Rosa is about 10 in the book. I haven't actually stated what age she is, but that's what she is. The boy's a bit older. And it's good, if you remember the famous 5, Julian was the older one that then was allowed to be in charge, as it were, old enough to just be in charge, which gives them a sort of a freedom. Also, I don't know, I hadn't originally thought about Granny Beaton in my original plan, but she just walked in. And I like that idea. Maybe it's because I'm a granny myself now. You have a different relationship with children when you're a granny than you do as a parent. I find it's a much freer relationship, you know, with grandchildren than I ever remember being able to do, because you're so concerned all the time that you're doing the right job when you're a parent. But with a granny, you have a different way of dealing with children. It's freer for them and it's freer for you, I think. So it sort of came with that age group attached. If I'd gone for the Katie Morag way of telling the story, the picture book, obviously it would have changed everything. It wouldn't have been possible to do what I'm doing with this one. What I would say about the older age group, I mean, I've been into lots of schools with the Rona books, which are adult books. And to be truthful, with later teenage, young adult books, they're very close to just adult books. And there's a lot of kids in school read my books, you know, which are, you would say, were adult books. So I think when you look at the older teenage books, they're literally the same level as adult books, but what they have is it's coming from a viewpoint of someone of that age group, but they're dealing with difficult and dark things as a teenager. So I can understand perfectly what Wendy said about just, you know, what sort of story do you want to tell and in what way do you want to tell it? And that lands you in the bracket you should probably be in.
We seem to have lost Wendy briefly, but I want to pick up on something you said earlier about the importance of location.
Yeah.
In your book, because Skye is like a second character, in yours. How do you think it lent itself to the story?
Well, Skye was a huge influence, obviously. I mean, it's been an influence on me for a long time. And way back at the beginning of the Rona books, I mean, Rona was adopted, and she was adopted by a couple who came from Skye. And I don't remember why I decided that, you know, way back with DriftNet, but I did, and I'm very glad I did. It gave her a sort of background that I like to explore now and again. And been going to Skye. I mean, my home village is Carbridge in the Highlands, where I am at the moment, and going to Skye from here has been something that happens regularly, and it is quite a magical place, because it's much bigger than people realize. You know, sadly, people arrive in Skye and don't realize that it's going to take you an hour to get from the bridge to Portree. That's on the good road, you know, and to get to the very top of the island, to get to the west of the islands. I mean, it's an incredibly big place, and it's full of interesting imagery. I mean, very powerful imagery. And most people don't realize you're talking about at least 250,000 visitors a year go to Skye. That won't have happened, of course, this year with the pandemic. So it's internationally known, even though it's got this wonderful world of what people think is a small island. And having travelled about, there's so many things you can do with the children in that environment. And if you know the island, or you know people that know those particular places, to give you an example, there's a scene in the book where they're all out in the canoe, and they're going along the coastline in the canoe, and it's a particular coastline. And whenever Skye is mentioned, the locations are real. They're there. You can go and visit them. You can be in a canoe and go through those caves that they go through. And I haven't gone into the caves myself in a canoe, but fortunately for me, someone did that, and they took a wonderful video of it, and they put it up on, Walking Highlands or something, or, canoeing in Skye. So you have a rich resource to draw on. Yeah. It's a huge character. And as far as I'm concerned, like Katie Morag, what will happen on Skye through the series. I don't foresee it happening off Skye unless it's for a brief period of time and coming back again, because there's just so much to work with.
How tricky was it to write from the point of view of Blaze?
Well, I first fell for Blaze via Twitter, where his Twitter account comes from the dog's point of view, and his owner, Steve, obviously runs it, but he talks as if it's coming from the dog, and it's very wry, and it's a bit, it's tongue-in-cheek, and it's very entertaining. And that was how I actually first engaged with the dog, and then I ended up meeting Steve, etc. So I just thought I want to do that with the story. It will be Blaze's voice, in essence, that you're hearing, and you're seeing the world through the dog's eyes. And that idea really came from seeing the way that was handled online by Steve. It feels as if you are listening to the dog, and that's what I wanted to achieve. Fortunately, I know the dogs, and I can always ask questions of Steve if I'm not sure. Like, for example, everything that the dog does in the book, it was the same with Time for the Dead. The dog is capable of, every physical thing that happens in the book. He's a very strong swimmer. Luach, at the beginning of the book, has not yet learned to swim. He's a strong swimmer. He can stay underwater. Everything is based on the reality of the dog. And also, there's something about Blaze. You think he looks at the world of humans with a wry eye. And that's fun to work with.
So, hi Wendy, you're back.
Hi, I got booted out. You all disappeared, and I'm on my phone now, which is the only way I can get in.
But you're back. I'm curious. as to the format that you've got both your books published in, because Lynn Blaze is on Kindle, but not on paperback as yet. And Wendy, Fergus and Flora, as far as I can tell when I was researching for this, are only on paperback.
Right. The reason for this, well, for Fergus and Flora were in Kindle and paperback, but the publisher has moved back to Australia and given me the rights back. They are currently, I'm turning the volume down a bit to get rid of the echo. They're currently, can you hear an echo?
Yeah.
No.
Sorry. They're currently between publishers because another publisher has picked them up. So that's why they're only on paperback. It's the old paperback, but they will come back in Kindle, rebranded with new titles. It'll be the same books, new titles, new books in the series, and new covers. So they're going to be called the Archaeological Mysteries, apart, not the Fergus and Flora Mysteries, and they'll have new titles.
Very good. I should say that we're in this. We got in the situation we're in with the Blaze book, with the pandemic and the printer shut down. So we had to make a decision about what we wanted to do about that, and we had a grand plan for when the paperback of The Time for the Dead came out, which obviously features Blaze, that we would also have the Blaze book out around the same time so that we could work them together if we were going round shops, etc. But of course the pandemic entered and that all couldn't happen. So rather than wait until the printers got into action again, we decided that we would put the Blaze book out as the pilot of the Blaze series out as an ebook first. And it also gave us a chance to sense, to get a reading back from the public that could access that, what they felt about it. And it was great because actually when we put it out in the first week, it ended up in the top 100 crime books, Scottish crime books chart, which you're not really expecting a dog book for children to end up there, but there was obviously a lot of interest from followers of Blaze and perhaps my people that read my books as well and had met Blaze through Time for the Dead as a character. And we just hung on to now. It was just now that we're, our printer's in a position to get back up and running properly. So that's why it's come out in that order. I mean, probably the same for Wendy, but one of the things with the ebook, you quite quickly get a lot of comments and a lot of reviews, which then you can use most of the publishers now bring their ebook out first in adult crime publishing, and they get a lot of responses and they get people writing reviews, which gives them a sort of base on which to bring out the physical book, and it's a sort of a picture ahead to the physical book. That's not normal in a children's book as far as I'm aware, but we're not in normal times, so not in normal times yet. Yeah. Uh-huh.
You'd noticed then, Lynn.
Yeah, I have noticed. Yeah.
What's the differences? What kind of different challenges are there in writing for children than there is in writing for adults? Do you want to start us off, Wendy?
Yeah, well, the first challenge was getting the reading level right, because children read up. So you want to stretch them. You want them to be able to understand, but you also want to stretch their vocabulary and stretch their reading skills. And you've got to remember that the voice is different. So the voice of my Shona Mackenzie or Cass Claymore characters, which are my adult characters, are totally different to a couple of teenagers who talk very differently. But the other thing you have to get right is the fact that the tendency is to try and show you're down with the kids by using the in language. Trust me, the in language that's in this week will not be in next week. It changes. In fact, it changes daily. So you just need to listen to any teenagers, and they might be saying something's wicked one day, and the next day it's sick, and the next day it's something else. And you're like, oh, no, that's old hat, Auntie Wendy. Oh, what? I've just got. So it's trying to get the voice of a teenager and the tone of a teenager for writing for them, giving a flavour of that it's different. They use different language without using current slang words, because current slang words won't be slang words next week. So it's a real difficult balancing act. So you can write something, you send it to the publisher, and the publisher will go, actually, teenagers are not using that anymore. And I go, right, okay, when did that change? Between me pressing send and you reading it, you know? So it's got to be. And for example, another thing that I was told with the publisher was I said they were using Twitter and WhatsApp and things, and I was told to stop using that because by the time they want it to be timeless, evergreen. That's another word that keeps coming up. I don't know if you hear it at all, Lynn, but if something's evergreen, the social media platforms, just because they're flavour of the month now doesn't mean they'll be the flavour of the month in 5 years' time. So they could have been overtaken by something completely different. So it's a real challenge to make sure that you're writing at the right level and you're not writing at the level you would write for your adult readers. Also, I've got to keep dead bodies out of it on a great extent. I'm not saying they don't appear, but on the whole, you've got to try and keep them out because that's for younger readers. You don't want it littered with dead bodies.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that expression you used, I think was used to me about the series being a classic series.
Yeah.
That can just live through time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not pocketed in a very particular year or moment in time. It's sort of universal.
Yeah.
And also you're looking for children. I mean, that saying, America shares a language with Britain, but we don't understand. We don't understand one another. I
but
think
we don't know which language it is we're saying.
Yeah, that's right. It's supposedly the same English. Yeah, but we're separated by a common language.
Yeah.
So I think you're right about. I wouldn't have considered. In fact, I don't think I'd remotely considered dropping into the world of the current thing that was happening, particularly online, because it definitely does. It does put the story in a very particular moment in time, and I think it loses its universality because of that. So I didn't, and also the story, Blaze is very much in tune with the wee girl who is very much in tune with the world of Skye and the animals and the creatures of the island. So I can't think of anywhere that's got more fairy places as it is in Skye, but it seems to be every corner you turn there's another fairy place. So it sort of gives a history to it as well as hopefully a future to it. The language, I agree with everything you said about that. You're right. Children want to read up. So you're in a world where it may be that you'll have, in fact, I know some parents have read the Blaze book to their children, used it as a sort of nighttime reading book. You've got children reading it themselves and maybe having to ask for some words if they're not sure about. For instance, for example, things like using the Gaelic words, because Skye is a Gaelic island, and like the north of Scotland, like round here, most locations are in Gaelic. But doing it in a way that doesn't feel that you've put it out with the scope of the children. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can remember reading books when I was young, and if there was a word I wasn't sure about, or I couldn't have said it out loud because I couldn't pronounce it, I just skipped it and carried on. It didn't stop me engaging with the story. But it's just, it was at a level that I wasn't, my reading and the word had not, you were reading up, you were reading harder things than your actual reading age. Yeah. And I think it is important. But there's so much you can say with good language that is accessible to all. Yeah, and I don't think I'll have dead bodies. No, I agree with that. I'm escaping the dead bodies when I write for Blaze.
You don't have a dead body inside. I do have a ghost in one of them, the second Ferguson Flora. But trust me, there's not a dead body or a ghost in sight in Bertie the Buffalo.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other adventures.
I mean, there's 2 more questions I got from your answers to those. So first of all, you were talking about a universality, so avoiding sort of things like current language and social media. But if you think about the books that you were sort of saying you were inspired by, like the Famous Five and things, they're very of that time. So would it really matter if you had like modern things in this one? Wouldn't they still be loved later, even knowing that it was like a more archaic social media? Or
well, from the point of view of the Famous Five, reading it as a wee Scottish girl, it seemed incredibly exotic because for a start they were all at boarding school. What was boarding school? Nobody I knew my entire life went to a boarding school. So, I mean, that made it kind of an adventure. And it was very, let's be honest, it was very class-ridden as well. But the thing about it was you were entering a world that you weren't part of. So that was, it was like a new world or something. It was like the Chalet School, which was a great idea in a book and should be happening, young people, using different languages, different days of the week. What a wonderful thing that was. I wish my school did that, but so yes, I can see that people could do it and it would fit and people would go back and read it because they wanted to re-enter the world. It's like writing a crime novel set back in the 70s or before people had to worry about forensics. Lots of people are doing that because they don't really want to bother about the forensic part of it, studiously avoiding that. I'll let Wendy see what she wants to say about it. But
yeah, I mean, to be honest, with the Famous Five, it is quite dated, but kids are still reading it. So yes, you're right, it does translate. But there are some things that don't translate, like the class situation and like the fact that they saw gypsies as being quite, a bunch of thieves and things. Now, we've moved away from that these days. We know travellers who are actually lovely, lovely people. So it's really difficult. I think it's difficult writing books these days because in the past, nobody seemed to care what they said, quite frankly. Now, we're very careful to think about the effect that might have on other groups. So I think in terms of it being evergreen, we need to be careful of the way we move things. Now, in my second book, The Dagger's Curse, it's basically there's a downer on men. And the reason for that is there's a historical reason for it. It's not me being a downer on it. But it's based around a lady called Christian McLagan. And Christian McLagan was a real Victorian lady who found a broch in Stirling, and she went to the Society of Antiquarians, Scottish Society of Antiquarians, and said, "I've found a broch," and they said, "No, you haven't, you're a woman." And that was actual fact, yes. So the broch was lost to time, and it was recently found about 6 years ago, and it's called Scotland's Lost Broch in real life. So it's based on the fact that they're now digging this broch up because they're archaeological mysteries, and Christian McLagan's not too keen on these men milling around in her broch. So there's a reason for it, and I've handled it, I hope I've handled it carefully, because I think we're more aware now of the way we talk about different groups of people, quite rightly so. So that's part of it becoming evergreen. I love the Famous Five books. I love Enid Blyton books, but there are sections of the society saying perhaps they weren't quite as PC if they could have been, but they were of their time, as Lynn said. You know, they were of their time. And they were an adventure. I loved them, and I still do. They were an adventure, and it was kids doing things that kids would not do now, because nobody would let kids roam around like that now and stay out on, just wander off on their bikes and camp out overnight for nights on end, because they'd see more danger in it.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because when I was 13, myself and two pals, we all had bikes and we were all keen about our bikes, and we went youth hosteling round Scotland. We were 13.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say that now to people, my father was a policeman and he was quite happy with it, because we booked our hostels, and when we would phone home when we reached that hostel, and off we went, 13-year-old girls, and we cycled around the north of Scotland and back. We were away about 10 days. Can you imagine if 13-year-old came and asked you to do that now? I know. Yeah, the fear factor would be too big, you know. But yeah, the Famous Five are anchored in a particular time, but the essence of the great storytelling.
Yes.
And what a cracking story she could tell.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, even within the sort of whole class system of the characters together as a gang were very powerful, and they empowered young people. Finding somebody your age as a hero in a story is just so empowering.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we are trying to do with our storytelling.
It does sound like that from the way you've described it. So, mindful of time, I want to ask you my sort of last question before we recap your books and things. You were both saying that you're avoiding dead bodies, but I think I read somewhere that young adult and children's fiction often has a higher body count, because it's a good way for children to kind of get used to like life and all the sort of endings and things of it. Why would you avoid having a dead body? Or do you think you might be tempted to put one in now?
I mean,
I think it's all about, I mean, every book, regardless of the age group, is character driven. Every story is character driven. You know, drama is a character in action. So people read particular series, they read them because they want to be with those characters. So I think it depends very much on whether how it fits within the story. From my own experience of writing crime novels, people are quite happy for you to kill lots of people, but don't for a moment harm an animal. You get the most grief ever if you harm an animal in an adult book. I still get messages about the one occasion where, you know, a cat died, and I'm, you know, way back barely. It was a bad person that did it, but that doesn't make any difference, you know, in terms of it. So I think all I could say to you, it would depend very much on the story, and it might be that you do have a body might turn up, but it wouldn't be perhaps I can't see myself writing a murder mystery for the dog.
No,
fair enough.
That I can't see. Yeah. Dealing with death for young people is important. Yeah. How do you deal with a death? I mean, the piece I read out, you already know the little girl is trying to deal with the death of her parents. So there is a dead body in there. It's invisible, but, you know, it's part of the backdrop. And I think it is important to include life in the story, as well, life and death. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I disappeared again. I keep getting kicked out. I think StreamYard hates me. So while
You're back.
I agree. I wouldn't. I don't really want to deal with murder in my mystery books, my children's books, because I deal with it a heck of a lot in my adult books. And to be honest, quite frankly, it's quite nice to have a break from it. But I think the element is the mystery. Yes, they do have to deal with death, and they hear about people being murdered. But I mean, somebody does die in my first Dagger's Curse, but it's not a murder and there's no investigation. Yeah, so it does bring up the fact that people do die, things do happen, but you have to, you know, deal with it. And also in my Dagger's Curse, the Flora's mum has a bit of a drinking problem, so she's not often very there for her, but she comes through in the end. She comes through for her in the end, and I think that's important for people to realise. And I wanted to deal with that our parents might have flaws, but they're always there for us. And I wanted that to come through. So yes, I don't shy away from difficult issues, but I don't really want the focus to be on a murder. It's more the mystery and the code element and things like that I want the readers to enjoy.
Because we've only got a few minutes left, do you want to just remind us of your books? Both of you, show us the covers and things again.
Lynn?
Yeah, okay, well, this is Blaze Dog Detective and the Magic Flag Mystery. Oh, I think you can see that. The cover was designed by a wonderful artist, Bronwyn, who does beautiful things. And that is, of course, the Granny B's crystal ball with Rory and Rosa and Blaze and Luach on it.
Well, I have, oops, I nearly picked the wrong book up. I've got, and I don't know if you'll see this right because I'm on a phone, but Bertie the Buffalo picture book. And Bertie the Buffalo also has a colouring book.
Oh.
He's got a colouring book. And if there was any left, there's also a soft toy. But he's Scotland's, that's the only one left. All the rest have been sold. The last two went to Poland and India. And we're waiting for more to arrive. But like everybody else, COVID has put a halt to everything. It's all been slowed down. But I've also got the Ferguson Flora Mysteries, the Dagger's Curse, and I've got another one called the Haunted Broch. And they're the first two. And the third one's going to be called the Warrior's Revenge. So there you go. Or at the moment, it's going to be called The Warrior's Revenge, but the titles are changing. So I don't know what it will be called. But if you want the books, the only way you can get the Ferguson Flora Mysteries is either you can get them on paperback on Amazon, or you can get them from me if you contact me at wendy@wendyhjones.com. You can get signed copies, and I will give you a discount on them. So because they're the last ones of the original stock, and there are not many left.
Excellent. Well, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you both about your books. It's been genuinely delightful. Wendy, I'm going to contact you about your books. Lynn, I've read Blaze and he's amazing. Please write more.
Okay, I'll get onto it right away. Thank you very much for looking after us today.
No worries.
And thank you, Lynn, for sharing. It's been a pleasure being on a panel with you. And thank you, Caz. You've been an amazing host.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And thank you to
Lucy.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this for me. It's been so amazing. Sorry about having disappeared there. My neighbour's dog's barking away. You must know that Blaze is...
yeah.
About Blaze, and you can hear people like banging on their doors, and you're like, oh no. But so the next event is coming up at 1 o'clock. Not long now. It's going to be Wendy again. Hopefully she will stick with us. Chris Longmuir and Jackie McLean, known as the Dangerous Dames. Oh, and they're going to be shared by Ian Skewis. author and editor. So catch us again at 1 o'clock, and that's hashtag Dundee and Angus Crime.
Okay.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Caz, again, and
No
can't wait
worries.
to see you with your next shared event as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.